Thank you everybody for joining. This is a great turnout already, and I'll keep an eye out if anybody else joins. So today I was going to discuss changes in cognition with aging, um, and just a little bit about me. And if anybody's come to my talks before, they've heard this, so I apologize, but just really quick. Um, I'm from Orchard Park, which is near Buffalo. Unfortunately, I had this Go Bills in here before last weekend, but that's okay. I'm always a fan. I went to Nazareth College for my undergraduate, and then I went to Syracuse University for my graduate. I've been a speech therapist for, I think I need to now change that to 16 years, but I've worked in a variety of settings. I've been here at Engage for a little over 2 years now. I spent a lot of time in the hospital setting, did some outpatient, inpatient, rehab, but I really enjoy working with individuals with different neurological conditions. It's kind of my passion. I love the brain. We love everything about it. So I have a Speak Out certification, which is a program that works on speech and voice with individuals with Parkinson's. I am also FEES trained, which is a type of swallow test that we can do here in the office. So that's just a little bit about me. So today we're going to talk about, first of all, what is cognition? That's a really loaded question. There's a lot of things that fall under the umbrella of cognition. So I'll just kind of walk through that and all the different areas. I'm going to talk about why we see changes in cognition as we age. What is actually changing with our brain? And then I'm going to talk about those common changes that we do see, some helpful tips and tricks, and then how can speech therapy help you? And again, go ahead and unmute yourself whenever you want if anybody has any questions. I can't see everybody, so if you're kind of flagging me, I'm not able to see that. So just please interrupt me. So what is cognition? Like I said, it's a loaded question. But we usually try to break it down into 5 primary domains of cognition, and I have them listed on here. This looks very wordy right now, but I wanted to just give an idea of all the different areas that can be cognition. So when we say, what kind of changes are you noticing with your cognition? It can be so many different areas. So attention is the first one that I wanted to just mention. So there's anything from staying focused on one thing, sustained focus for a long time, selective attention, where you're focusing on that one thing while there's a lot of other stuff going on around you, alternating attention, that's going back and forth between 2 different things, and divided, that's our multitasking. That's the hardest type of attention. The reason I put attention first is because without attention, that makes memory challenging because you have to attend to something in order to remember it. So there's so many different types of memory, long-term memory, short-term memory, working memory. Then we have everything, a lot of other different areas of memory underneath that. I won't get into too many details. But like I was saying, in order to remember something, you need to be able to attend to it. So we call it a prerequisite to memory. So sometimes if I'm working with somebody who is saying, I'm having trouble remembering, we'll pare it back and say, well, let's see if are you staying focused? Are you attending? Can you get rid of the external distractions that are maybe getting in the way of you attending to what you're trying to remember. But not only just remember it, you have to be able to store it and then retrieve that memory too. So there's so many different parts of memory as well. The third domain is executive functioning. This is our really higher level cognitive skills. And there is a ton of different areas underneath that. Decision making, problem solving, planning, sequencing, multitasking, flexibility, anticipation, theory of mind, emotional self-regulation, inhibition, organization, ... There's a lot of different skills that really fall under that. And this is that really high level cognition that we use on a day-to-day basis. Language does fall under the cognitive, one of the domains. It can be considered separate, but that can be anything from speaking, verbal language, to understanding language, and reading and writing. And then we have visual spatial skills. So things that, involve visual memory. awareness of your surroundings, your depth perception, being able to manipulate things visually, and like I said, etc. So there's a lot more underneath this, but that's kind of just in general. That's why it's hard to say what is cognition, because it is a lot of different things, right? So why does our cognition change? Well, unfortunately, as we age, some parts of our brain do shrink. And they have been finding that the areas that end up shrinking first are those areas of cognition. So that's sometimes usually that front part of our brain. And there's a couple other parts of our brain, but that's why it's happening. So it's actually getting smaller with age. There's sometimes what happens is we'll get a communication breakdown between, or it's less effective between the neurons in our brain. So that's why sometimes some things may take you a little bit longer, because of that. The neurons that are all connecting in our brain, they're just not as effective with sending that message. We also see that we get a decrease in the blood flow of our brain. So we need blood flow for it to work, right? So sometimes that slows down or we get a little bit less of that. And then there's what I'm calling secondary symptoms or other things that might be influencing your cognition. So that could be medications. It could be a mixture of medications. It could be a side effect of a medication. Sensory changes also with age. So if we are starting to lose hearing, and you're not hearing the information, well, you're not going to remember it because you didn't hear it in the first place. So that can definitely impact our cognition if there's changes with hearing and such. Other conditions, and I make that very general because, just as an example, if you're having a lot of pain, you're not going to be able to attend to something. And like we talked about earlier, if you're not attending to something, you won't be able to remember it. Or if you can't if you're in so much pain that you're getting distracted and you're not able to take the time to figure out a problem that's happening, that can impact you being able to accomplish a task. Changes in mood. So again, this can, if you don't have the motivation or if you're not trying or attempting, that's going to impact your attention. It's going to impact you being able to learn and adjust and different factors like that. And then lack of sleep, or if you have frequent fatigue, that can of course change our ability to do some cognitive tasks. Okay. So common changes in cognition with age. So do you see those 2 stars that I put next to that title? That's my little caveat, because I want to make sure that I wanted to provide you with this information, but I don't want this to be your, you take this and 100% apply it to you as a medical advisement, because I'm not your doctor. And, there can be so many other factors. So I just kind of wanted to give you information, what research has showed us, and I want you to just take it all in. And then if there's anything that you need to talk to your doctor about, please do that. So I just wanted to give that little caveat, okay? So I'll just kind of run through these and talk about them a little bit. So some changes that we'll see with aging, and I call them common changes, but I'm not saying that there's, we don't want to, and I don't also want you to worry about anything if you see some of these or you don't see some of these. I just want to give you all this information. So we'll see that it sometimes will take increased time to complete a task. So, and that could be for various reasons. And that could, what I was talking about with the brain, how we get some, the connections between the neurons are less efficient. So that could be why it just takes a little bit longer to process through thinking of something or working through a task. So that's sometimes that we see that, and that's fairly common. We'll see some changes with what we call working memory. And working memory is where you briefly hold information. Maybe you have to manipulate it, and then you can get rid of that information. So for example, if you're driving and somebody's saying, okay, you're going to turn left at this next stop sign, you hold it in your head, you do what you have to do, and then you don't have to remember that a week later that you did that. Or it's remembering somebody's phone number with enough time,
with enough time.
mute some people that just came in. Okay. You remember the phone number just long enough to dial it, but then you're not going to be quizzed on that phone number next week. So you hold it in briefly and then get rid of it. So sometimes there's some changes with that, and it's because of the memory portion of that and storing it for just that amount of time. So sometimes we'll also see some common changes with what we call recent or new memory. So that's just retrieval of any new information. So new information that you're, that like new information that's new to you. And I was talking about that there's so many different types of memory. So one is called prospective memory, and that's where you have to you're trying to remember something that you need to do in the future. So for my example, it's I need to take my medication after I eat breakfast, and then you go through the task of eating breakfast, and sometimes once you get to that time, that memory is lost that you knew you had to do that. And I'm going to talk about some tips for things like this in a little bit. But sometimes there's some changes with that. It's that brief, that future memory, but that's not that far down the day. It's not like you have to remember something 3 weeks later. Does that make sense? Yeah. Hi. Whoop, why didn't it change? There we go. Also, we'll see commonly we'll see some changes with those executive function tasks that I was explaining earlier. And there's a lot of things that fall under that. Like I was talking about the problem solving, sequencing, organization, but it's specifically when it's the common change that we see, specifically if it's something that's new, it's complex, or there's a time frame involved in it that you have to do it in a quick manner. And remember, I was talking about that. We'll see some changes with your ability to complete tasks in a timely manner. It might take you a little bit longer. So any of those executive function tasks that I was talking about earlier, if they're new, if they're more complex and more involved, or if there's a time factor, that's where we see some common changes. But if it's our typical tasks that don't have you've been doing them for years, they're pretty simple, and you can take your time. If we see changes with that, that's not as much common. Let me take a quick sip of water, excuse me. Something else that we'll commonly see is changes with selective attention. And that's what I was talking about earlier with where we are focused on doing something, but there's a lot of things going on around you. Such as, you've got the television on or the radio on while you're trying to do a task. That might be more challenging to then stay focused on what you're doing. And it's really like the multitasking factor with that. And to go along with that, also the divided attention. So when you're trying to do the two things at once, that difficulty with multitasking, sometimes we'll see some changes with that. Now, this next one's pretty interesting that I actually found this information recently. So sometimes we'll see some changes with being able to problem solve something. So a situation arises when it's a known problem, but you're trying to do it in a new way. So, or when you're trying to solve a problem that you've never experienced before. So again, that kind of goes back to whether it's new and complex, though that's where we commonly see some changes with your ability to do that. If it's new or it's a problem you've had before, but you're trying to solve it in a new way. That kind of makes sense? Yeah. I thought that was interesting, and it makes sense to me. I mean, it's new information. You're trying to come up with new strategies, new methods to solve the problem. So it's a little bit more challenging. And then we'll see sometimes it takes a little bit longer to find words. We've all done it, right? Sometimes difficulty recalling names. We've all done it. That's pretty common, but it's also it's hard to say when it's that line between when it's common to be searching for words and names and then when it's more of a I don't want to say a problem, but it's more like, how is it impacting your life? And is it something that you want to work on? So that's kind of where we, as a speech therapist, that's where we kind of break down, do we work on it or not? But yes, it's common. We need sometimes take a little bit longer to think of a word we want or think of somebody's name. Okay. I know that was a lot of information I just thrown at you for that one. Does anybody have any questions so far? Feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask if you do.
I have one.
Mhm.
What is theory of the mind?
Yes. So it's the understanding of other people's beliefs, desires, their emotions, and knowing that that can be different from yours. Yeah, it's important. Yeah, yeah, good question. All right. All right, I've got some tips for you. So, I wanted to just talk to you about, okay, well, yeah, I'm noticing some of these things. So what can I do about it? So I wanted to talk about a bunch of helpful tips that can positively influence our mental function and our cognition. So the biggest one, physical activity. Especially Pat and Power, we're always saying exercise every day, get some physical exercise, right? So that can really help the brain as well. Exercise the body, exercise the mind, right? Avoiding smoking and alcohol, that'll help as well. Healthy diet definitely will help. Reducing stress, easier said than done, but it can be very helpful, right? Adequate sleep, and like I was talking about earlier, that can definitely impact cognition. So getting good sleep is very important. Sometimes also easier said than done, but we know the positive effect that sleep does. And then regular medical checkups. And that's, you can discuss these things with your doctor. Maybe even have them just take a peek at your medication list. I think that's something that really should be harped on a little bit more often, is like, hey, can you look at my medication list, especially as we keep adding and adding? Make sure, do I need to be on everything? Are any of them impacting each other? What kind of side effects can I see? Just regularly looking at that is really important, because like I was saying, that medications can definitely impact our cognitive function as well. Right. Maintain a daily routine. So I was talking about how sometimes it's more challenging to problem solve things when it's something that's new. Or when something comes up, or we're not going to be able to remember something in 3 weeks from now, or maybe even later in the day. So maintaining a daily routine and keeping that regularity of, obviously making sure you're taking medications and eating your meals, and your exercise routine and all of that can be really helpful for our cognitive function. Social engagements, I mean, it's really important. I know it's hard now with everybody getting on and off sick, but it's so important to have those social interactions, not only for practicing language, but you're having that one-on-one time, or even as a small group, and your brain is working and functioning while you're following a conversation. You're anticipating what you want to say next. You're retaining the information they're telling you. You're, providing ideas for somebody's issues, or anything like that. I mean, if you really think about it, you're doing so many cognitive skills when you're just getting together with a friend for lunch, or talking with people at the gym, having a phone conversation. It's very important. It's really helpful for our cognition. Engaging in mentally stimulating activities, and I just put a small list here. So jigsaw puzzles, reading. Everybody loves the Wordle. I know I love the Wordle. It's challenging. Crossword puzzles, adult education classes, learning new skills, anything like that. Um, I'd be happy to provide even more ideas if you want some more ideas. But there's so many really good games that are mentally challenging. I mean, there's so many language-based games too, like categories and Scrabble, and Bananagrams is a new one that I saw recently. So there's a lot of good language-based ones too, and they're fun too. Um, And then I have a tip that I'm calling use active strategies. So this can help to store new memories by using strategies. And these are probably some things that you guys are already doing, but thinking how it's helpful for your cognition. So again, I have follow a routine. That routine, I always do this at this time. I always take my medication at noon and, having that routine. But you can also use some external techniques. So using a calendar, using a pill box, things like that. Those are strategies that you probably don't realize, like I'm using this strategy to help, but that can be really helpful for a lot of different skills. But also take time to actively process new information, and that's okay. Um, like I was saying earlier, sometimes it just takes a little bit longer to make those neuron connections, and that's okay. And maybe that means repeating that information or using a strategy so that you can then store that information to be able to use later. Okay. Any questions on those tips and tricks? All right. So I didn't really want to get in depth into this too much, but what is speech therapy? Well, we can do a lot of things. And you can see that cognition is the third one down there. And I just kind of listed out some general things with that. But and I've done a couple talks before about voice and speech. So obviously we can help with that. And we can help with swallowing, which I did a talk about too. But cognition is right under that umbrella of speech therapy too. So how can speech therapy help? My short answer is we can help with all of the areas that I discussed. And that's the easy answer because that is what we can do. Speech therapy, I always talk about as a big umbrella because we don't just do speech, and cognition is also under that umbrella, and that includes all the domains that I was discussing earlier. So, and then underneath that, I have occupational therapy because occupational therapy can also address cognition, and they address it in a little bit of a different way than we do, but it's also we can also both work with you on similar skills, but we work on it in two different ways because occupational therapy helps in the context of performing everyday activities. Your day and your job, your occupation is your daily tasks. So you don't have to be working to work with occupational therapy, but they can help you to compensate with a lot of different strategies to adapt the environment and then to really be as independent and safe as you can be. And then in the middle there, with any cognitive issues or noted changes, it's never too mild to bring up or to address with your doctor. If you're saying, hey, I'm noticing this, even though it might be under that common changes list that I was discussing, that's okay to bring up to your doctor. And that's okay to then say, maybe speech therapy or occupational therapy is something that I would like to do to work on this. Even though it's common, that doesn't mean we're not going to address it. It's common. That's not what I'm saying. It's definitely something that we can work on. Okay. Questions? A lot of information. Feel free to unmute yourself because I can't, well, maybe I can see if I change this. See, if you flag me, I can't see you. Well, I can actually, let me stop sharing and then I think I can see everybody. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, Debbie, do you have a question?
I do.
Oh, yes.
Unfortunately, I couldn't be here for the very beginning, but I see that the meeting was recorded.
Yes.
Is there any way to get the link or to get copies of your screen, the information you shared?
Yes, we are going to share it to Engage's YouTube channel. And I don't know, I guess maybe it could be an email too. I'd have to ask either Pat or Liz on that one.
Okay.
But yes, even if we send an email and then that has the link to the YouTube page,
Right.
we can do it that way too. And I could probably share my PowerPoint. I don't see why not. So yeah, look for
Okay,
an
thank
email.
you.
Hmm. You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for joining. Any other questions? No? Well, I know, oh, yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, my husband was part of the group. He has passed away. And I wanted, his sister also had Parkinson's. His sister um, had severe, I would say, the motor symptoms, where my husband had very little in the way of motor symptoms, and yet his cognitive function seemed to go down rapidly. Is there any correlation between the the progression of Parkinson's and certain cognitive abilities?
Well, um, I would say yes, but also no at the same time. So what we do see is, I believe it's, I think we see about 20 to 25% of individuals with the initial diagnosis presenting with some cognitive changes. But then as the years go on, we see that percentage increase, years of diagnosis. And it's really also uh, how the cognitive changes or the motor changes are impacting you daily, and being able to adjust and accommodate you strategies. But we do see that link, but also we don't, because as we've all learned, everybody's
Everybody's different.
differently, right? But we think about what's changing with the dopamine. That's the same, and that's why we have that diagnosis. And the dopamine is impacting, or the lack of dopamine is impacting people differently. Yeah.
Kathy, is there a standardized test?
Um, Not really. We have a lot of different, at least on a speech therapy standpoint, yes, we have a lot of different tests that we can provide based on what skills we want to look at. But I know, like, if you were to go for a full neurocognitive or neuropsych test, that takes hours, and they go through a lot of different testing, in all the different areas of speech, language, and then they do beyond that. On a speech therapy standpoint, yes, we have a lot of different tests out there. Anything from just like cognition with, counting money, telling time, things like that, to all the way up to, like, can you make your way through a maze and problem solve all these different tasks. So there are a lot of formal testing that we can provide. Yeah.
Is that something you do, or you have to go
Yes.
to a
Yeah.
neurologist?
Yeah. I don't have access to all the tests that there is out there, but I do have a few in particular that I can give, again, based on, kind of what level you're at. Which is nice, because I've had a couple people say to me, nobody's ever tested my cognition, and you're the only one that really keeps an eye on it and lets me know if there's changes. So sometimes that is helpful, if you like that information. So yeah, I do have a couple different types of tests. And in OT, again, occupational therapy, they also have different testing as well that looks at things in a little bit of a different light than speech therapy does. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? If you want to wait till after the recording stops, if you have any, like, a personal question, I'd be happy to answer it. Or if you want to email me separate, feel free to do that. Yeah, Joanne.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Kathryn. Thank you. I wonder if it's important to bring someone else, like, Dave or whatever, because what I see as uh, maybe not a problem, he may see many different things that are changing. And um, how do you focus in on the things that have changed?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point that family members or caregivers, anybody familiar with you is very helpful for providing that information because if you're not aware of it, you're not able to report it to me in the first place. But also, sometimes I always say to individuals that I work with that sometimes we don't know that you had trouble with it until you try to do something. You might be going through day to day okay, but then if I give you a task that's a little bit more complex that maybe you've avoided or you give to somebody else to do, and then you have some challenges with it, we say, oh, okay. And that kind of gives that light bulb like, oh, okay, that was challenging. I didn't know it was going to be. So sometimes seeing it from, hearing it from a family member or somebody who's close with you that knows you well is a little bit of oh yeah, no, I didn't notice that. And awareness, that's also an area under cognition too, so that self-awareness and that's a really important skill to have in order to work on cognition. So if you're not aware of it, it's hard to work on, or it's hard to implement a strategy. So yes, that's a great point, having a family member or caregiver to join. It can be really helpful. There was a second part to your question and I already lost it. Talking about cognition, common change.
Right. Um, Bringing someone else along, I guess, who
Yeah.
knows you well.
Yeah.
I guess that was the second part of it, is
Okay.
that
Yeah. So that's very important. It's important to get family and caregivers and friends involved with when it comes to this because, we work on skills that you need on a day-to-day basis, or we discuss strategies that could be helpful to implement at home. And those family members are the ones that can help support you to implement those strategies or remind you, hey, don't forget, you've been writing it on the calendar. Why don't you reference that? And then you can they can help support what we've been working on in here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, Sandra.
Or or would you tell, or would this be somebody else's domain? How do you tell the difference between cognitive changes that are maybe just normal aging versus Parkinson's versus something else like grief?
Great question. And that is very challenging. But it also comes down to what is it impacting you on a day-to-day basis. So, if you're forgetting somebody's name from time to time, is that impacting you enough, either safety wise or being able to be social, and is it something you want to work on versus are you forgetting to take your medications? And yes, that's a problem. That's a safety issue, right? So it's looking at, yes, it could be a common change, but is it something that's impacting your safety, your ability to be independent, or is it just something you want to work on because it's meaning something to you? And that's a personal goal or personal thing that you want to work on. That's where it is. It's not a matter of, oh, it's common, we're not going to work on it. We'll see that when people get older. We won't work on it. But that's not the case. But that's different for everybody. So, so because it's different for everybody, does it also matter of why? Does it matter if it's because of your Parkinson's, or does it matter because of other factors? It also doesn't really matter why. Yes, I care about your medical, history and everything, but if it's something that's a problem, a safety issue, or something you want to work on, no matter whether it's from Parkinson's or something else, we can still work on it. Yeah.
And could somebody come to you to work on stuff like that, even if maybe their speech is mostly okay, or, to
Yeah.
them not problematic? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a joke in our profession that we're called speech therapists, but we could be called speech, language, cognitive voice, swallowing, and go on and on and on therapists, because it's more than just speech. So yeah. And I've had some people come to me, I'm like, you know, they get a speech referral. I'm like, they don't know, I don't know why I'm here. I speak fine. Yes. There's a lot more that we can work on. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great questions. Message, Todd, I see your message. Yep. Ooh, I don't hear you though. Ooh. Yeah, Todd, I see you talk. I don't know, something's wrong with your microphone, it looks like. Oh, sorry. You're unmuted, so. I'm gonna mute you and then unmute you again, see if that helps. And try to unmute again. Yeah. No, I'm not hearing you. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, Todd, I can't hear you. Must be something with the microphone. Gotta love technology. Oh, I see a question. Hold on one second.
I think his audio is not turned on.
Yeah, he's unmuted though.
I heard him in the beginning,
Yeah, I don't.
and then all of a sudden they said they couldn't hear him. So
Yeah.
he did have it before you started.
I just got a message about Alkira collaborating with us at Engage with anyone needing assistance. This chat looks weird. Sorry. We'll refer to Jill. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Sure.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize I was muted or wasn't muted. My
I'm
bad.
sorry.
I just wanted to say, and Kathryn, if you and I haven't actually connected, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm Jill. I own Alkira Marriage and Family Therapy. We do mental health and relationship health. And Liz and I collaborate pretty regularly. She'll refer patients over to us if they're in need of additional relational mental health support. And we refer back to you and folks that engage. So I think, there's a little bit of a benefit there that if you're not sure if you should talk about something with someone, talk about it and see what resources they have. If they can help you with it, they will. And if they think somebody else should be helping, we try to loop people in. So
Absolutely.
That's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, even though we haven't formally met, I have referred people to you because I know of you. So nice to meet you.
You too.
Yeah, thank you for that information.
Sure.
All right. So like I said at the beginning, is that I recorded this, so we will link it to our YouTube if you want to review some of the things that I went through, probably fairly quickly. So I apologize. I tend to talk fast sometimes, but I will also see if I'm able to send my PowerPoint slides so that then you can then have the physical information in there too. But I'm happy to take any other questions at any time. If you think of something down the road, you can shoot me an email. And actually, I'm going to share my screen again real quick to show you my info. There's that. We see that is the website, our phone number here at Engage. The info is the just general for the office, and then my email is at the bottom there. Feel free to email with any questions. Okay. Thank you everybody for coming. Really appreciate it. I hope it was helpful.
It was great, Kathryn. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
hanging up, Pat.
Thank you.
You're welcome.